Empress Nixis stood at the observation deck of her flagship, her crystalline form catching the light of Earth's sun. The planet below, now under Etherian control, looked deceptively peaceful from orbit. Her iridescent skin rippled with patterns of satisfaction as the latest battle reports streamed directly into her neural interface. Earth had fallen in precisely 47 standard cycles, exactly as predicted. Your Majesty, General Castor's voice resonated through the chamber, his crystalline form dim with deference. The human resistance leader has been captured. Nixis turned, her towering 9-foot frame casting prismatic shadows across the polished floor. The one who destroyed the Zenith warship. Yes, Empress. Major James Harrison. He refuses to accept termination protocol. A flicker of interest disturbed her usually perfect composure. In 15 centuries of conquest, few species had managed to damage even a scout vessel, let alone destroy a Zenith-class warship. Bring him to my private observation chamber. I wish to understand this anomaly. The human stood in the center of her private chamber, stance defiant despite the neural restraints. Nixis observed him with scientific detachment, noting his robust physique, impressive for such a primitive species. His dark skin bore scars of battle, and his eyes held an intensity that she found oddly compelling. You destroyed my finest warship, she stated, circling him. A vessel that survived conflicts across 12 galaxies, felled by a primitive species barely out of their planetary cradle. Harrison tracked her movement, his expression unreadable. We're full of surprises. Indeed. Nixis activated the chamber's scanning protocols. Holographic displays materialized around them, showing detailed analyses of human physiology. Your species fascinates me in one regard. Despite your obvious technological inadequacies, you've managed to spread across your solar system with remarkable speed. Your reproductive efficiency is notable. She manipulated the displays, highlighting human reproductive systems. Such a primitive method of continuation. Random genetic recombination, lengthy gestation periods, intensive resource requirements for offspring. Her voice carried carefully cultivated disdain. The Etherian method of crystalline replication is far superior. Is that why your empire is stagnating? Harrison's question cut through her scientific monologue like a plasma blade. Nixis froze, her crystalline form flickering with shock. Explain. Your species hasn't produced new genetic variations in what, 5 centuries? We've intercepted enough of your medical transmissions to know your superior reproduction is failing. Each generation is more brittle than the last. She moved closer, looming over him. You dare to suggest that your empire of living crystal is about to shatter? Yes. Harrison met her gaze without flinching. Maybe that's why you're really here. Not to conquer us, but to study us. To understand how we keep adapting, surviving, evolving. Nixis felt an unfamiliar sensation in her core matrix, something dangerously close to uncertainty. She dismissed her guards with a thought, sealing the chamber. You think you understand the complexities of Etherian genetics, human? I understand that your species is dying. And I understand that you're curious about us, about me, or I'd already be dead. Her form shimmered with a mix of anger and fascination. Perhaps a more thorough examination is warranted. She deactivated his restraints with a gesture. Show me what makes your species so resilient. What followed defied every principle of Etherian biology. Human touch against living crystal created resonances she had never experienced, awakening dormant facets of her crystalline matrix. Harrison's body heat catalyzed changes in her molecular structure, creating impossible harmonies between organic and crystalline forms. Hours later, as Harrison was escorted back to secured quarters, Nixis initiated her regular diagnostic protocols. The results shattered 15 centuries of certainty. Her crystalline matrix had begun incorporating organic elements, creating hybrid structures that should have been impossible. The implications were staggering. She, who had mocked human reproduction as primitive, now carried within her the first human-Etherian hybrid in history. The Empire's doctrine of crystalline purity, maintained for millennia, had been undone in a single night of curiosity. As her private chamber's lights dimmed to match her troubled mood, Nixis placed a hand against her slowly transforming core. Inside, impossible new patterns were already beginning to form, threatening everything she had ever believed about her species' superiority. The human, it seemed, had been right. The Empire needed new life, and now she carried it within her, for better or worse. 3 cycles had passed since Empress Nixis's encounter with the human prisoner. She stood in her private regeneration chamber, watching with growing unease as her crystalline form displayed unprecedented changes. Patches of her formerly pure crystal structure now showed swirling patterns of iridescent organic material, pulsing with a life force entirely foreign to Etherian biology. "The changes are accelerating, Your Majesty," First Scientist Vex reported, his own crystalline form dimmed with concern as he studied the latest scans. "The hybrid cellular structures are rewriting your base matrix at an atomic level." Nixis observed the holographic displays showing her internal transformation. Where there should have been perfect geometric patterns of crystalline reproduction, there were now flowing, organic structures interweaving with her crystal matrix. "Can it be stopped? Any attempt to purify your matrix now would result in complete structural failure," Vex admitted. "The hybrid cells have integrated too deeply. They're evolving." The word sent shudders through her crystalline form. Evolution was not part of Etherian existence. They had achieved perfection through careful crystal replication, or so they had believed for millennia. Yet here was evidence that their supposed perfection had become a dead end. "Your Majesty," Vex continued, his tone carefully modulated, "the human prisoner." "Major Harrison," Nixis corrected automatically, then felt shock at her own instinctive response. "Yes. Major Harrison's genetic material has somehow activated dormant protocols in your matrix. Protocols we didn't even know existed. It's as if our species was designed to eventually merge with organic life forms." The implication staggered her. "That's impossible. The Etherian Empire was founded on the principle of crystal purity. Our superiority comes from our transcendence of organic limitations. Yet our reproduction rates have fallen by 82% in the past 3 centuries, Vex countered. Each new generation of pure crystal beings is more brittle, less adaptable. But your hybrid state." He gestured to the scans. "Your matrix is showing more stability and adaptability than we've seen in millennia." A distant commotion drew their attention. The chamber's security feeds showed a disturbance in the palace's outer corridors. Supreme Commander Arcturus, leader of the Purist faction, was approaching with a contingent of guards. "They know," Nixis realized. Her condition couldn't have remained secret forever, but she had hoped for more time. "Empress." Arcturus's voice boomed through the communication system. "In the name of crystal purity, submit yourself for immediate matrix cleansing." Nixis straightened to her full height, her form blazing with imperial authority. "You dare to command your Empress? You are no longer fit to rule," Arcturus declared. "You have corrupted the purity of our species through congress with a primitive organic being. The hybrid abomination you harbor must be destroyed." Something fierce and primitive awoke in Nixis, an organic protective instinct foreign to Etherian nature. Her form pulsed with new power as hybrid energies surged through her matrix. "The only abomination is our species' stagnation, hidden behind pretty words about purity. Then you leave us no choice." Arcturus raised his hand, signaling his guards to breach the chamber's defenses. Nixis turned to Vex. "Find Harrison. Get him to the secondary command center. He needs to understand what's happening to both of us." As the scientist hurried to comply, she faced the entrance, gathering her power. The doors shattered inward as purist forces breached the chamber. Arcturus led them, his crystalline form rigid with zealotry. "Surrender, Empress. We can still save you from this contamination. Save me? Nixis laughed, the sound resonating with new harmonics that made her attackers step back. You're trying to save a dying dream of purity. Look at yourselves, perfect, unchanging, and sterile. We need this change. We need to evolve. She raised her hands, and for the first time in her existence, Nixis felt power flow through her that wasn't purely crystalline. Organic energy intertwined with her traditional abilities, creating something entirely new. The hybrid force burst from her in a wave that sent her attackers staggering back, their perfect crystalline forms showing hairline fractures from exposure to this new power. Impossible, Arcturus gasped, staring at the cracks spreading through his arm. What have you become? The future, Nixis answered, her voice carrying both imperial authority and new warmth. Whether you wish it or not. She swept past her stunned attackers, her partially organic form allowing her to move with a fluidity no pure crystal being could match. The hybrid child within her pulsed with energy, as if responding to its mother's surge of power. For the first time, Nixis felt no shame at the changes in her body, only a fierce pride and determination. The Aetherian Empire had prided itself on achieving perfection. But true perfection, Nixis now understood, wasn't a fixed state, it was the ability to adapt, to change, to grow. Just as humans had taught themselves to survive against overwhelming odds, she would learn to embrace this transformation. As she hurried toward the secondary command center where Harrison waited, Nixis felt the future shifting around her. The Empire would change or it would shatter, but it could never return to what it had been. And perhaps that was exactly what their species needed to survive. Nixis found Harrison in the secondary command center, already deep in discussion with first scientist Vex. The human's eyes widened at her transformed appearance, her once purely crystalline form now swirled with organic patterns that pulsed with life. You look. Harrison paused, searching for words. Contaminated? Nixis suggested bitterly. Beautiful, he corrected. Like crystal and starlight in living motion. Before she could respond, the command center's displays lit up with alerts. Across the capital, purist forces were mobilizing. Several crystalline spires had already declared allegiance to Arcturus's faction. The purists are broadcasting across all channels, Vex reported, his form dimming with concern. They're calling for a return to crystal purity and... He hesitated, the immediate termination of the hybrid entity. Harrison stepped closer to Nixis, protective instinct evident in his stance. They'll have to get through me first. Through us, came a new voice. Admiral Lyra entered the chamber, her crystalline form bearing traces of organic patterns similar to Nixis's. Behind her came other Aetherians, all showing signs of transformation. You're changing too, Nixis realized. Lyra nodded. It began in those of us who had the most contact with humans during the occupation. At first, we tried to hide it, afraid of being labeled impure. But when we saw you embracing the change... She straightened proudly. We are the future you spoke of, Your Majesty. The adaptive protocols are spreading, Vex confirmed, studying readings. It's as if exposure to human genetic material awakened dormant evolutionary programming in our species. We're seeing changes across all levels of society. Harrison watched the displays showing the spreading transformation. Your empire is dividing into two species, those who can adapt and those who can't. Or won't. A massive explosion rocked the palace complex. On the security feeds, they watched purist forces advancing through the lower levels, their perfect crystalline form stark against the flowing architecture. They're targeting the genetic archives, Vex announced. If they destroy our ancestral records, we'll lose any chance of understanding how this adaptation was built into our species. Nixis's form pulsed with determination. We need those records. Admiral Lyra, gather all transformed Aetherians who can fight. We'll hold the purists here. Vex, take Harrison to the archives. Find out how our ancestors encoded this possibility into our matrix. I'm not leaving you, Harrison protested. This isn't about us anymore. Nixis touched her core where the hybrid child grew. It's about the future of both our species. Her partially organic features softened. Find the truth. Help us understand what we're becoming. As Harrison reluctantly followed Vex toward the archives, Nixis turned to face the approaching conflict. Around her, transformed Etherians took defensive positions, their hybrid forms flowing with new strength. The first wave of purist forces crashed against their defenses like a crystalline tide. But where pure crystal met hybrid forms, the purists found themselves outmatched. The transformed Etherians moved with unprecedented fluidity, their hybrid nature allowing them to adapt mid-battle. Abominations. Arcturus's voice boomed through the chamber as he led a fresh assault. You destroy millennia of crystal purity with your organic taint. Nixis met his attack directly, her hybrid energies clashing with his pure crystalline power. You call this taint? Her form shifted and flowed around his rigid strikes. I call it salvation. The battle raged through the palace's upper levels, but gradually the advantage shifted to the transformed defenders. The purists' perfect, unchanging forms proved increasingly vulnerable to the adaptable hybrid forces. Then Harrison's voice crackled over the command center's communication system, Nixis. We found something in the archives. The Etherian founders, they weren't originally crystalline beings. What? Nixis deflected another of Arcturus's attacks, her attention split between battle and revelation. They were organic beings who engineered their crystalline form as an evolutionary stepping stone. Vex's voice joined in. The ability to merge with other species was built in from the start. It wasn't meant to be permanent. The news hit like a shockwave through the chamber. Even the purist forces paused in their assault, their perfect forms trembling with denial. Our ancestors chose crystal form as a survival strategy during a cosmic radiation crisis, Vex continued. But they encoded the ability to adapt and evolve when we encountered compatible species. They knew isolation would lead to stagnation. Arcturus's form cracked visibly at the revelation. Lies. We are perfect. We transcended organic weakness. No, Nixis countered, her voice carrying the weight of newfound truth. We survived. And now we're surviving again, exactly as our ancestors planned. This child I carry isn't an abomination, it's the key to our species' next evolution. The hybrid energy within her surged outward, not as a weapon this time but as a wave of transformation. Where it touched purist forces, dormant protocols awakened. Some fought the change, their forms shattering under the strain of resistance. Others, including many of Arcturus's own followers, felt their crystalline matrices begin to shift and flow with new possibility. Looking at her transformed people, Nixis finally understood. The Etherian Empire hadn't achieved perfection, they had trapped themselves in a beautiful but deadly stasis. Now, through an accident of conquest and curiosity, they had found their way back to their ancestors' true vision, not purity, but endless adaptation. Not conquest, but evolution through connection. She felt the hybrid child pulse within her core, no longer a symbol of shame but a beacon of hope for two species' shared future. The days following the battle in the palace brought chaos to the Etherian Empire. News of their organic origin spread through the crystalline cities like wildfire, fracturing society into those embracing transformation and those desperately clinging to crystal purity. But an even greater crisis loomed. The hybrid protocols are destabilizing in those who resist the change, Vex explained, displaying complex genetic models in the secure bunker where Nixis, Harrison, and their allies had taken refuge. The more they fight the transformation, the more brittle their matrices become. Harrison studied the data, his military training helping him grasp the strategic implications. How many will be affected? Roughly 40% of the population shows signs of active resistance to the protocols, Lyra reported, her own hybrid form glowing with concern. Without intervention, their matrices will begin to shatter within days. Nixis placed a hand on her core, where the hybrid child's energy pulsed stronger each day. And those accepting the change are stabilizing, Vex confirmed. But we need more data about the successful hybridization process. His crystalline eyes focused meaningfully on Nixis's transformed state. You need to study my child, Nixis stated flatly. Your transformation is the key to saving billions, Vex said gently. Both human and Etherean. Before anyone could respond, proximity alarms blared through the bunker. Security feeds showed Arcturus's forces approaching, but something was wrong. The once perfect crystalline soldiers moved erratically, their forms showing dangerous fracture patterns. They're dying, Harrison realized. Their bodies are literally breaking apart from resisting the change. And they blame us, Nixis added grimly. Especially this child. The bunker's outer defenses began to fall as the desperate purist forces launched their assault. Their crystalline forms might be failing, but their weapons still functioned with deadly efficiency. We need to get you to the research facility on Nexus Prime, Vex urged. It's our best chance to understand and stabilize the hybridization process before we lose half our population. Nexus Prime. Harrison frowned. The research world. The most advanced genetic laboratories in the Empire, Lyra confirmed. And currently held by scientists who've already begun their own transformation. They'll protect you. A massive explosion rocked the bunker. Through failing security feeds, they watched Arcturus lead his forces forward, his once magnificent crystalline form now webbed with critical fractures. You can't run forever, Empress, his voice boomed through the complex. End this aberration or watch your empire shatter. Nixis turned to Harrison, her hybrid features showing new expressiveness. I never asked if you were ready for this. To be part of rewriting two species' future. Harrison took her hand, organic warmth meeting hybrid crystal. I was ready the moment I chose to show you humanity's strength rather than accept execution. He smiled slightly. Though I admit, I didn't expect to help revolutionize an empire. How human of you, Nixis replied, surprising herself with a touch of humor in crisis. Always exceeding expectations. Another explosion breached the inner defenses. Vex rushed to the bunker's control center. The emergency transport is ready. We have one chance to reach the orbital platform and from there, jump to Nexus Prime. Go, Lyra ordered, taking command of the remaining hybrid guards. We'll hold them here. Admiral. Nixis began. My Empress, Lyra's form pulsed with fierce loyalty. You carry the future of both our peoples. We who have embraced change will buy you the time you need. As Nixis, Harrison, and Vex rushed toward the transport bay, the sounds of battle erupted behind them. Hybrid warriors met crystalline purists in a clash of ideologies made manifest through violence. They reached the transport pad just as Arcturus broke through the final defenses. The purist leader's once perfect form was now a horror of fractured crystal and exposed matrix. You've destroyed everything, he raged, raising his weapon. No, Nixis countered as the transport field began to form around them. I've freed us from a prison of false perfection. The transport beam engaged, dissolving their forms into pure energy. The last thing Nixis saw was Arcturus's crystal body finally shattering under the strain of his resistance to change. They materialized on the orbital platform to find more chaos. The transformation was spreading faster now, affecting every level of Etherean society. Ships fled from crystal worlds, carrying both those seeking to preserve purity and those desperate to understand their changing nature. Look, Harrison pointed to the platform's view screens. Across Etherean space, crystalline cities were changing, their rigid geometries beginning to flow with organic patterns. It's not just people transforming. It's everything we built. Life finds a way, Vex observed, his scientist's curiosity evident even in crisis. Our ancestors encoded the adaptation protocols into everything, our bodies, our buildings, our very civilization. We weren't meant to remain crystalline forever. As their ship prepared to jump to Nexus Prime, Nixis watched her capital world shimmer with spreading transformation. The empire she had inherited was dying, but something new and wonderful was being born. She felt the hybrid child pulse within her core, its energy patterns growing more complex and beautiful with each passing moment. Was it worth it? Harrison asked softly. Losing the empire you knew? Nixis turned to him, her hybrid form glowing with newfound certainty. We didn't lose an empire. We found our way back to who we were meant to become. She touched her core. And forward to who we will be. The laboratories of Nexus Prime hummed with energy as the moment of birth approached. 3 months had passed since their desperate flight from the capital, months that had transformed the Etherean Empire in ways none could have predicted. The final readings are stable, Vex announced, monitoring the complex array of hybrid organic crystalline medical equipment surrounding Nixis. The child's matrix is perfect, a true fusion of both species' strengths. Harrison hadn't left Nixis's side in days, watching in wonder as her crystalline form had adapted to accommodate their growing child. The hybrid pregnancy had changed her further, her once rigid crystal structure now flowing like liquid starlight. The transformation has reached 89% of surviving Etherean populations, Admiral Lyra reported from the doorway. She had escaped the capital's fall and now led the reformed Imperial fleet. Those who survived the change are thriving. Reports show increased adaptability, stronger matrices, and the return of true reproductive capabilities. And Earth? Harrison asked, though his eyes never left Nixis. The human colonies are cautiously optimistic. The first voluntary human-Etherean partnerships are forming, following your example. Both species are discovering we have more to offer each other than anyone imagined. Nixis's form suddenly pulsed with intense light. The hybrid child's energy signature spiked, sending cascades of data across the monitoring systems. It's time, she whispered. What followed defied description in any single language. Crystals sang and organic cells danced as the first human-Etherean hybrid emerged into existence. The child's form shifted between states, sometimes crystalline, sometimes organic, but always beautiful in its fluid grace. She's perfect, Harrison breathed, watching their daughter's form settle into a stable hybrid state that somehow captured the best of both species. Aurora, Nixis named her, watching the patterns of light play through their child's partially crystalline form. For the dawn she represents. The birth of Aurora rippled through the empire like a shockwave of hope. On thousands of worlds, transformed Etherians felt their hybrid matrices resonate with the new life's energy signature. Even resistant pure crystal enclaves reported spontaneous transformations as Aurora's existence proved beyond doubt that change was not only possible but beautiful. The genetic analysis is fascinating, Vex reported, studying the child's hybrid structure. Her DNA matrix combination is exactly what our ancestors engineered our species to achieve. She can shift between organic and crystalline states at will, adapting to any environment. And her genetic pattern is completely stable, ready to be passed on to future generations. More than that, Lyra added, her existence has invalidated the entire concept of crystal purity. The remaining purist factions are dissolving as the evidence of hybrid superiority becomes undeniable. Harrison cradled his daughter, marveling as she instinctively shifted her surface temperature to match his human warmth. She's the bridge between our species. She's the future, Nixis corrected, her hybrid form glowing with maternal pride. But not just for our peoples. The adaptive protocols we discovered, they're not limited to humans and Etherians. Our ancestors designed us to eventually merge with any compatible species, creating an ever-evolving tapestry of life across the galaxy. 6 months later, Nixis stood before the newly formed Galactic Council, an unprecedented gathering of human and transformed Etherian representatives. Aurora, growing with extraordinary speed, sat in a special chamber that accommodated her shifting nature. The old empire is gone, Nyxis declared, her hybrid form resplendent with new authority. We stand now at the dawn of something greater. Not an empire built on conquest and false notions of purity, but a federation founded on the principle that strength lies in union, in adaptation, in the courage to become more than we are. She gestured to Aurora, who demonstrated her gift by flowing between forms, crystal, organic, and beautiful combinations of both. My daughter is not an aberration or a threat to our species' purity. She is the fulfillment of our ancestors' greatest dream, that life should never stagnate, never stop growing, never cease to reach for the stars. Harrison joined them, no longer a conquered enemy but a symbol of the change possible when old barriers fell. Together, we've proven that the future belongs not to those who cling to false perfection, but to those brave enough to evolve. The chamber erupted in celebration as representatives of both species came together, many already showing signs of their own transformations. Hybrid children played alongside human and transformed Etherian young, their forms shifting and adapting as naturally as breathing. Nyxis watched it all, feeling the pulse of change rippling through the galaxy. The empire she had inherited was indeed gone, but in its place stood something far more precious, a future without limits, where change was not feared but embraced, where difference was not a weakness but a source of strength. Aurora laughed, the sound carrying harmonics of both crystal song and human joy, a promise of endless possibilities yet to come. In her, Nyxis saw not just the salvation of two species, but a new chapter in the story of life itself, one written not in conquest or purity, but in the eternal dance of adaptation, love, and the courage to become more than anyone thought possible.